discussion, so we ran a little bit late. How are y'all?
Doing good here.
Doing good? Okay, give me just a second. I'm going to switch gears. Let me find my stuff. Here we go. Oh, okay. So good to see everybody tonight. Let me just pull up the chat part too so I can see what's going on. Oh gosh. Well, it would help if I could spell too. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is, yeah, sorry we can't see you, Ty or Camille, but we're glad you're here at least. And for those of you that are just joining us, if you have not muted, sorry, I'm in my office, so this is external webcam here. It's not built into my computer, so yeah, you may see just the top of my head at times because I'm still trying to get this just right. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to spend a few minutes talking about some of the things we went over last week and reviewing that. Then we're going to go specifically into some of those data analysis pieces and how you get started with a data plan and data teams and all those kind of things. Then I'm going to share with you a tool that I think is pretty helpful. And then finally, we're going to close out talking about why it's important to have a data team and how it can be helpful. So hopefully, I had some problems with Moodle tonight, but I finally got it. Hopefully you received an email from me with tonight's presentation, you know, and got it. But if you didn't, I will post it for you in those important documents and resources, you know, tomorrow, or I'll probably do it tonight. But wanted you guys to kind of see that. So let's kind of start off with reviewing what we talked about last week a little bit. So if you remember, we talked about the importance, and I'm going to do my share screen here since I'm in my office. I can actually do this. So give me just a second here and let me see. I don't want my desktop, tell my desktop one. Okay, hang on. It won't let me minimize anything, so I've got to close out a bunch of stuff here. It's been one of those days, guys, so just kind of bear with me. Sorry. I know y'all can probably relate to that. Let's see. Is that the right one, or is that? No, that's wrong class, sorry. Where are you? There it is. Okay. All right. So can you guys see this okay?
No, you're not sharing this right now. I don't see it anyway.
You're not seeing it yet? Okay. I just moved it, so let's see. Here's share screen, desktop 2. There we go. Can y'all see it now?
Oh, still no. Oh, there we go. It's changed.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, sorry, because I've got my other meetings converting to a video file, and I got too much going on, I think. Sorry about that, guys. So let's see. Start. Okay. So in terms of what we talked about last week, let's go ahead and move through some of this. So, you know, I shared with you some of the work that we had done in Dallas School District, and I think Joseph was nice enough to find that and send everybody the link. So hopefully, you know, you've gotten some time to delve into this. But this is some work we did several years ago, really talking about data. And one of the things that we found that was pretty systemic across our schools, and I think it's somewhat indicative of what's going on even still, was that people didn't really know how to handle data. You know, it's not at all unusual for us to see schools getting just reams and reams of data. In fact, we were certainly data rich in the Dallas schools at the time, but we were also very analysis poor. And I think that's what happens far too frequently. So we decided that there were 3 basic things we needed to do. We needed to orient our campuses to data. We needed to assist them with data analysis, and we needed to provide them with meaningful and useful feedback. You know, one of the things too that we found was, you know, we were lucky, we were a large school district, and we had a comprehensive research and evaluation team. And man, they could crunch those numbers and come up with all kinds of beautiful data charts and things like that. But it wasn't particularly helpful or useful. So it's not about how sophisticated your system is. It's really about how you use it and what you do with the information and the data. And that's what I want to focus on with you guys tonight. We also talked about, how important it is to have a systemic model as well as a process that's focused on data that is going to improve student achievement. Now, I know in Texas, and I think it's true in Louisiana as well, we would get all kinds of data about how much money we spent per child and, what our average daily attendance was, how many years of experience our teachers had, how many of them had master's degrees, how many had doctorates, how many had their bachelor's, etc. And while it's interesting data, and, sometimes it's kind of fun to read, or it may be helpful in some instances, overall, that kind of data does not improve student achievement. Data analysis and the time and energy we spend on analyzing data and working with data has to be focused on improving student achievement. The other thing we found too was that we had to make sure the data we were looking at really aligned to our own instructional initiatives. So for example, if you are doing a big literacy initiative, then the majority of the data that you should be gathering, analyzing, and acting upon should revolve around that literacy piece. Again, it might be really interesting to see how students are doing on their health and physical well-being, those physical fitness tests. But if it's not really aligned to those important instructional initiatives, again, it's just interesting reading if that, okay? So we also wanted to make sure that we were doing this from a research base, okay? One of the things that we found over time was that depending on the level of a teacher, whether they taught at elementary, middle, or high school, had a whole lot to do with how they viewed the world. So elementary teachers, they are typically, and I'm stereotyping a little bit, but this is backed up by actual research and data, elementary teachers want to be told what to do and how to do it. Okay? They're not always really interested in creating a model or whatever. If you give them a model, they'll jump right in and use it. The middle school teachers, on the other hand, were kind of in the middle. They wanted to know some of the research, and they wanted to have some input on developing the model you were going to use or the process. But at the same time, they didn't want to spend just a whole lot of time on that. They were much more interested in the individual student. So very student-focused at middle school. High school teachers, they're not going to do anything unless you can give them tons of research that backs up what you're saying. They don't trust us as administrators or leaders, and you better have some really compelling reasons. So we looked at several research models, and we wanted to make sure that, there's a million different models out there, guys, let's be honest. But we chose to focus on 5 different tools. DataWise, obviously one of our textbooks. Another one, Driven by Data by Paul Bambrick-Santoyo. We use that book a lot. We also looked at the Data Coach's Guide. It's sort of a practical handbook. And then we were moving into instructional rounds as a way to gather and observe data, and that's by Richard Elmore out of Harvard. And then, of course, we always relied on the Department of Education and some of the stats and information they gave us, as well as Texas Education Agency. But in terms of how we use these, DataWise is how we set up our system. Okay, so we just kind of followed their process and all of that. What we liked about Paul Santoyo's work, Paul Bambrick, and Driven by Data, he gives you some actual tools and lots of videos that you can practice with. So we found that very helpful. The Data Coach's Guide was for us a professional development piece. We ended up creating a data coach or a data administrator's position within our schools, or a cohort of schools, depending on the size of it. And this is how we trained them and how we wanted them to function and work. The last piece of it is, we can get all kinds of data from assessments, formative assessments, summative assessments, standardized testing, etc. But while that's all wonderful, and I think we talked a little bit before about the difference between historical data and current data, it is absolutely essential. You cannot have data exist without observation of teachers. And those of you that have had me in like EDL 710, I'm very big on observations, but, you have to make sure that whatever it is that you are trying to implement and influence, based on the data results that you've gotten, you are observing that in real time with teachers, etc. And we just really kind of fell in love with Elmore's process for doing that, because we felt like it was not only the most practical, but it really gave us the kind of input and outputs that we needed. We also talked about the data analysis model and process. And again, I'm not going to read this to you guys, but at the center of everything is, big shock, student achievement, student learning. And then outside of that, you know, how do we do that? Through data-driven dialogue, instructionally relevant questions, and lots of feedback. And of course, to do that, we have a process that starts with framing the question. You know, it's kind of like, if you've ever written, I don't know, a thesis or something, you have to start with the right question. So that's really critical. Then how do you organize and take that question so that there's dialogue? How and what kind of data do you need to collect? How do you analyze it? And while we can analyze it a million different ways, it's really all about that interpretation. And then the pieces that, quite honestly, this is where people tend to stop, guys, right here, is we're pretty good about collecting the data. We're even pretty good about analyzing it. We do okay with interpreting, and that's where we stop. But the most critical pieces of this cycle are you have to select actions, and you have to actually implement them, and then you have to monitor the results. So this is a cycle for a reason, but these are the two pieces where everybody fails and everybody stops. So we wanted to make sure that we did not do that, and that this became a continuous piece and cycle. And they talk about that, as you know, in DataWise. So let's talk today specifically about the data analysis process, and it starts with framing the question. So the first step in the process is really determining what information and questions need to be answered. So, you know, if we don't do that, like I said, we can collect all kinds of data, but it may not be answering the essential thing or the essential question that we need to be answering. So let me give you a real concrete example. We noticed that when I was a high school principal, our Algebra 1 scores were just not good. You know, we were getting like 25–30% passage on the state test, and it just really, like I said, it was really impacting our students negatively. It was certainly hurting our school. So, you know, we had tons of data. We got data from the state, we got data from the district, we got data from ourselves, you know, about Algebra 1. What we failed to realize was that while we were looking at all of this data, it wasn't really addressing our problems. We could tell you by student how many passed, how many failed. We could break it down by ethnicity. We could break it down by gender. We could break it down by how many years they'd been in a certain school. You know, there was a million different ways for us to look at it and collect it. But we weren't asking the right question. Because the more that we began to look at this, and the more we started thinking about it, and the more we observed in the classrooms, it really wasn't an algebra problem. It had nothing to do with algebra. The problem was that many of our students had gaps in their learning from 7th and 8th grade. So when it came time to do those algebra type problems, they couldn't do them because they had missing background knowledge and information. So once we figured that out, we were able to ask the right questions and frame it in such a way that we could then have true meaningful dialogue, and we started collecting data very differently. It wasn't helping us just to look at those aggregate scores around algebra. We had to really focus here. So that's absolutely essential when you do that, and it is the first step in our process. Okay, so we just talked about this. When you frame that question, it provides direction and it gives you focus. Because as I said, I'm sure you guys have had this experience. You've gone through data ad nauseum, and you don't know any more by the time you're finished than when you started. So it's actually about not only creating the right questions, but breaking it down into detailed components and being very specific. You know, what is it? My grandmother, who was grew up on a farm, used to say, you know, you can't eat the whole cow at once. You got to do it, you know, a bite at a time. It's the same kind of idea. You have to break it down into sizable pieces and ask those right questions. Because if we had just tried to fix everything that was wrong with algebra, we would have completely missed the point. We had to really focus on and identify what our students were missing from 7th and 8th grade concepts that were the building blocks for success in 9th grade algebra. Okay? So, we've got a tool that you can use, and I posted this for you guys tonight, I think. If not, I'll go back and double check and make sure I did, about how do you do this. Because, I can sit here and say all night, get the right question, make it specific, etc. So, for example, here are some guiding questions, and it starts very generally, and as you move along the continuum here, it becomes more and more specific. So, what kind of questions do you have to ask? Well, what do we want to know? What are we attempting to measure or monitor? What questions are we asking from the data? What are we hoping to learn about our own practices? And why is this so important? So, if you wanted to work through this, how did the students perform on the reading? The STAR test is the Texas state assessment, so you could substitute in here all kinds of tests. But how did the students perform generally in reading? But as we move along the continuum, it becomes more and more specific. So what specific objectives or content areas of test data need the most focus? What areas need improvement from a both instructional and curricular point? So for the 7th grade students, what student expectations or objectives for the reading STAR exam were the lowest? And I will tell you, when they release those sampled questions or they release, old test versions or whatever, it is very hard to do data analysis if you do not have the actual test questions with you. Because again, otherwise, until you know how a question was asked, what was the frame of reference for the student, etc., it's very difficult to get to these. But if you continue moving along that continuum, remember I said it goes from general to more and more specific, you also have to know why is this important. Then breaking it down even more, what specific objectives or content areas of test data need the most focus? So for example, when I was principal at MacArthur High School in Irving, we missed being exemplary, which was the highest rating you could get, by 3 Hispanic students in 11th grade writing. Broke our hearts, but that's how you know that you've really got data. And what areas, again, need improvement. So, for example, 7th grade students, what student expectations or objectives were our lowest? And again, you've got to break it down to the individual student. And then finally, what are your primary concerns about the instructional program? And how will information obtained from this data analysis study improve your overall program? So remember I talked about it goes from general to specific. If you wanted to completely close the loop, you would come right back around here to general, because one of the things that we noticed, when we were looking at our programs was we did not have, while we had a strong writing program, for example, with our students, we were not taking care of some of our ESL students like we needed to. They weren't getting the rigor and the relevance that they needed. Okay? So, questions, comments, concerns, thoughts about how we frame those questions and come up with them? So it's a nice little handy tool right here that you can use. First step in data analysis. You guys look like you're bored out of your minds. I need to do something to liven this up tonight. It's hard to make data exciting.
Do you just pick a subject? Is that what you're saying? Pick a subject first?
What I would do is when you get your data back, and think about this historically. So for example, typically, now this is not always true, but typically social studies might be the highest area, but your lowest area is math. So when you get your scores, look at where those areas that are low, then break it down even further. So either by grade level, by content, or by subject area. So, I know typically in elementary school, our 3rd grade students would do great, and our 5th grade students would do great, but our 4th grade students didn't do so well in math. So you break it down by content, then you further break it down, like I said, either by grade level or by a specific subject. So algebra tends to be in high school where we fail. Then once you do that, you continue this process and you break it down even more. So let's take my fourth graders as an example, and they're not doing very well in math. Well, when I look at my students by group, my white students are doing pretty well. My Hispanic students are doing pretty well, but maybe my black students are not performing, or there's a gap between those achievement scores. So then I'm going to focus on my black students, and I'm going to break it down even more to see, is it a gender issue? Is there a difference between males and females? Or is it something to do with economics? My students from a low socioeconomic status are doing worse. So you just keep kind of unpeeling those layers until you get to the root cause of the problem. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns, guys? Sorry, I'm looking here to see if anybody else has got a chat question. Okay. All right. So if that's where you start, how do you do that and who does it? So one of the things that we proposed was that every school have a data team. Now this is a little bit controversial. Some people don't like this. Some people say that, oh, this should be done within a team or a department. So for example, if you've got a problem with fourth grade data, the fourth grade teachers need to be looking at it. And while I don't disagree with that, we decided to be a little more generic and have a data team that was made up of people from across grade levels or the different subject areas within a content. So for example, our data team at the elementary schools would have a first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade teacher on it. Our math data teams at the high schools would have an algebra, geometry, algebra 2, pre-calculus, calculus teacher on it, for example. Why did we do that, and why was that important? Because you need to look at data not only horizontally, but also vertically. So if I've got a problem in fourth grade math or algebra 1, as I said, we actually found the root of the problem was missing instructional foundation pieces in 7th and 8th grade. For our fourth graders, it could be something that they didn't get, or a concept that they didn't learn, or was maybe missing from the curriculum that was needed in first or second grade. So not only are you looking at what's occurring in that grade level, broken down by ethnicity, by student, by gender, etc., you also have to look at what is happening before, as well as planning for after. So a data team that is cross-grade level or cross-curricular can be really, really helpful. Plus, they tend to be somewhat more objective because it's not their kids necessarily that you're talking about. So what is a data team? It's a small group of people with skills sharing a common purpose, which is focused on student achievement, and they have accountability for what they're doing. So this is a critical element in ensuring that our students are going to get what they need, and our school as a whole is going to progress. So data teams support that campus decision, I'm sorry, that got broken off, decision-making piece that's really important. And how do they help and support our campuses? Well, they work through the data analysis process, they help to make instructional decisions, and they communicate those goals and results to campus stakeholders. Again, it's not just analysis, guys. You've got to close that loop as we talked about. So that includes making plans, making decisions, communicating them, and then monitoring and following up on our results. Okay? So I'm going to skip through a couple of these, and we're just going to get some time to talk. So I did give you the website in case you guys want, and it is a hot link in there, so you can go through and look at this stuff at your own pleasure. And the other thing that's really nice about it, you don't have to totally invent the wheel. Dallas did put together, not that their stuff's the best, but not a lot of school districts have gone to this level of detail, quite honestly, or parishes. So there are a lot of tools on there that all you've got to do is download. You don't have to recreate this, including not only like the one I just showed you, the framing the question tool, but also there's a whole toolbox. There's literacy reviews about data. There's people you can contact about it, but there's also some really good professional development modules modules in here. So if you're trying to get a data team going and you want to do some professional development, or you want to share this with your principal, again, you don't have to go through and recreate the wheel. So let me see if it'll let me in here while I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so talks about the services that this particular program does. Here's your, sorry, it's been really slow. Talks about the frameworks and things that they put together. Then within their toolbox, sorry, it's just my computer here. This is one of the tools right here that I just showed you guys, and I think I posted for y'all in your, let me see if it'll open up where you guys can still see it. Now it's going to be on my other screen. Here, I'll move it over. There we go. Here's the tool, and all you have to do is click, whoops, enable editing, and you can type in it, change it, take stuff out, whatever, real simple. So that's kind of nice. Then we've also got the professional development modules here for you guys too. So it really helps to do that. So let's say like Data Analysis 101. Talks about the data, the concepts, the terms, how to interpret, etc. And then, of course, you've got some books and resources. So one of the things that I know Dr. Perry and I talk a lot about in the EDL program is we always want to give you guys something that's practical and usable. And so, like I said, we can absolutely steal this shamelessly from Dallas ISD because it is public. And then there's a lot of different reports and articles too for you that, like I said, all hot links. So as you're thinking about that, hopefully you're going to find some of these helpful and useful. Okay? So those are our references. And then these are some, there's a million different things out there, but like I talked about, these are the things that we felt like were the most useful and helpful. But there's some additional resources if you guys are really interested. Okay? So let me turn this off so I can see everybody again. Okay, so let me look at your questions. And, oh, okay, that's a good question, Allison. So her question was, does the focus question become common knowledge for the whole school? It's really kind of depends. Some schools, and this is where one of the nice things about this whole process was that it can be very individualized to different campuses. Because, guys, in a district as large as like a Dallas ISD, it's 432 square miles. You've got schools that could not be more different, in different neighborhoods with different needs. And so we left it to the principal and the leadership team to decide, do you want to make this a school-wide focus, and are these your goals for the year? Or is it something you want to keep within your teams? I think it really depends on what's best for your school and how you function best. I know from some of you last year, you were talking about you had at your school some great teams, and then you had some that weren't very good. In that case, it may become just something that is shared with just one or two teams. In other places, it's a whole system. As I've done some reading with you guys and listened to your thoughts about your individual schools, some schools have really got data going well. And so then I would share it across. Okay. Okay, what can I do to liven y'all up? Y'all just look like you're just dropping. So you should feel sorry for me. I'm still at LSUS tonight. I've only been here 12 hours. What other questions or comments do you guys have? Okay, well, I'm going to give you a scenario. I'm going to make you participate for at least a couple minutes before we sign off for tonight. So you are the newly assigned principal to John R. Good Elementary School. It is an urban school. It's got approximately 500 students, very diverse, both ethnically and socioeconomically. And this school has seen a continual decline in their student achievement scores. So much so that they are only a few points away from becoming a low achieving or underachieving school in their state accountability system. Their particular areas of need are primarily in math and science. So you are the newly assigned principal. What kind of data are you going to want to look at and use as you begin to learn about your school and start planning for the new school year?
I want to look at the SPS calculator for the previous year. Did you say it was a high school or a middle school?
Elementary.
Oh, geez. Well, I cannot think of what any of those calculations are. So I'll shut up right now, but I'd like to see that part first.
Okay. So state achievement data. Okay. And you guys have a report card like Joseph was talking about that gives you some insights into what happened in previous years. Okay. What else?
I like to look at the different, I don't know if you call them strands or whatever, but like geometry or the different clusters of different subjects like geometry or measurement or whatever. You know, in kindergarten we have, you know, those simple little things, but you can see that they score particularly low in one section. So that's something that you can work on.
Okay, absolutely. You're going to want to look at like questions or objectives and do some grouping. So, you know, there's algebra in kindergarten, there's algebra in 5th grade, and then there's algebra in algebra in the actual course. So, yeah, you're definitely going to want to look by strand, by objective, and like areas to see if you're noticing any data trends. Okay, what other ideas?
I would want to look at two things that I would think that would be important is your super subgroups as far as you know, to find specific dips in your data to focus on those kids. Also, teacher observation scores. How are the teachers performing in the classroom, and how does that tie to the data?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Guys, don't ever forget how important it is to look at teacher data. You know, one of the things, and you know, I'm assuming that you guys have the ability in your school districts to look at individual teacher results for standardized testing. But if you don't, you may have to crunch the numbers yourselves and do that, because what is not unusual is that you will have in a let's pick a team. Let's say we'll stay with 3rd grade tonight. So 3rd grade team, let's say you've got 6 teachers. Well, guess what? The average scores look pretty good, but 2 of your teachers got 100% passing, 100% advanced scores. One of your teachers only got 10%. So don't let teachers hide within a grade level or a particular content area because other teachers are really scoring at the very top, and so the average looks good. Somebody else here, Billy, typed in, you know, Dibbles. Yeah, absolutely. I would use Dibbles, Leap 360. District assessments are great. The other thing that I would encourage you to think about and do too would be to do some pre-testing. We know there's going to be a summer dip for kids, but, you know, really kind of delve in and look at where they are currently, you know, and how much did they lose over that summer kind of thing too. Okay, what other?
I think to further that, it's kind of like we do I know others do the common formative assessments, because then what we do is we teach the standard and then we come back to that and talk more about it and see like what they're missing, because then it does help. Like I taught 3rd grade last year, now I'm in 2nd grade, so it's able to help me see as well like what my 2nd graders need to know to be able to move on into 3rd.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point, Julie. You've got, you know, as we said a little while ago, you cannot just focus on your grade level. You've always got to look at least 1 or 2 grade levels below, and then you've also got to look 1 to 2 grade levels ahead, because if we don't do that, then we're not preparing our kids accordingly. The other thing that I would encourage you to do too is, guys, look at test questions and how they're actually asked. And then I also would look at and encourage you to look at error reports. Okay, why do you want to do that? One of the things that you might find, let's say that it is a state level math assessment and the students had 4 multiple choice options. And for the students, you know, they got it right. Okay, great. We're not going to worry about those. But, you know, let's say 40% of your students got that question wrong. But of that 40%, all but 1 chose letter whatever that was incorrect. You want to look at that error and what it was that students chose to figure out why they chose the wrong answer and what it is that led them to that. Does that make sense? Because if you understand the errors, that's where you find gaps in teaching and learning. Okay? And too often we don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. But real data analysis, it's not just about compiling charts and numbers and all that. It's really delving into questions, responses for students, incorrect as well as correct, and then having students talk about and think about how and why they chose particular answers. And you can't see that happen unless you're in classrooms with teachers. You know, I can't sit in my office at, you know, at the central administration building and I can crunch numbers all day, but if I don't engage with students and teachers about the results that they're getting, then we really have some problems, okay? You know, and then that's also how you identify too, is it a curriculum problem or is it an instruction problem? Or is it something wrong with the assessment? You know, even though the state creates these wonderful assessments, I know that we certainly found some questions in Texas that were not very well written, and sometimes they didn't even have the right answer available. So, okay, what else, guys? I'm sorry, I'm trying to read the chats too. Okay, Taylor has a good question. Is there a test that measures deductive and analytical reasoning? There's probably several out there, you know, and I think part of it is what Louisiana offers. I know in Texas there's several things, but, you know, one of the things that I would encourage you to do when you're thinking about data analysis is if an objective, and I know we're supposed to be talking about data, but if your standard or your objective says students will be able to identify whatever, teach them not to identify. Teach them to analyze or to apply or to synthesize. Then when you're creating your own teacher tests or your team is creating a test, be sure that you assess students at that higher level of Bloom's and get them to apply or synthesize or analyze. And if you do that, then when they get to the state assessment, they're going to be more than prepared. Guys, I'm just going to be honest with you. It is extremely difficult to find a test that is aligned to your state test that is going to assess students at those higher levels. The best tests that I've ever seen are made by teachers from the classroom or by teams of teachers. If you're really lucky, you've got a great assessment and curriculum team at your parish or your district that can do this. But there's just not a lot out there, guys, that you can go and buy. You know, trust me, if there were, they'd be, you know, quadruple billionaires. That's going to be aligned to your state test and your state standards. So, Taylor, I wish I could say, yes, here's your go-to resource, but unfortunately, there's just not that much out there that's really, really good. So, and be aware of test prep kinds of materials. Again, they're not always aligned. Okay. Hey, what else? Sorry, I'm trying to read some of these. Okay, sorry. Oh, I just lost y'all. Sorry about that. There you go. Okay. Other questions, comments, concerns? I said this is not the most fun topic to talk about. We were just talking about an EDL 700, you know, the professional learning communities, what colors people wear, and I was way more fun than data. So I'm going to have to give y'all something more exciting next week.
All right, well, I looked up for elementary school, I think it's 100% assessment index in Louisiana.
Okay.
So it's going to be all off of their LEAP or whatever tests they're taking. But I know in high school, we get data certs every year for the different categories our SPS is calculated.
Mm-hmm.
And that breaks it down student by student. And you're basically just certifying the data that this is true. And that all goes to the state and gets calculated into your SPS. So really by the end of the year, we can pretty accurately calculate what our SPS is going to be. Mm-hmm. And this is a school that's approaching failing, but that means their SPS is going down. I want to know why, like which part of it. So if I can see those data certs, I want to see, okay, is it because every grade, you know, across the board is like their assessment levels are going down, their achievement levels are going down, or do we have a problem in fourth grade, or, you know, like try to like target what the issue is. Then you can dig deeper into like, okay, well, which parts of the test, which particular types of questions, getting as detailed into that kind of. Hopefully, you've had the same testing coordinator for the last couple of years.
Yeah, and then that trend line data is absolutely essential because you need to catch it and figure out where the problem is starting. And, you know, unfortunately, sometimes, you know, if it's 2 or 3 grade levels previous or, you know, prerequisite kind of courses, you have to go back and reteach those concepts. You know, that's what we find when we have to remediate with students. The biggest problem oftentimes is they're missing a foundational skill or they missed a critical concept, and it just becomes sort of that, you know, snowball rolling downhill. It just gets worse and worse and worse over time because they miss one of those really important skills early on. So yeah, Joseph, you're absolutely right. I would definitely look at that. Would you guys share with students their data assessment results historically and their profiles and all that? Why or why not?
I know at our school we share data quite a bit with our students. They know their DRA level. They have an understanding of what that level means. And for most kids, it motivates them because they see where they need to go and how they need to progress. So they know their LEAP score, and they set their own individual goals that we keep track of, and you know, they watch it grow, and it motivates them to continue. I teach 5th grade, and nowadays school is so rigorous in every single class that I can already see in 5th grade, you know, a decline in their morale to keep going, you know. And so I think that kind of pushes them when they have the inside look into you know, what we see and what we analyze. I think it gives them ownership into what they're learning.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I also teach with Allison, and she's on one end of the campus on C Hall, and I'm on the other on A Hall for kindergarten and 1st grade. But, you know, in that grade level, we do the same. The kindergartners, they know what we need to score for DRA. Now, their drawings may be a little bit different than what they have in 5th grade, but they know their starting point and they know where they need to be. And for those visual learners, they see it often. You know, it's posted in the classroom on where we need to go. But even at a young age, they need to know where they are, where we need to get, and then know the process of how we're going to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you guys. And students owning their learning, particularly from a data analysis standpoint, is extremely powerful and empowering. Do you guys share other teachers' results? Do you post those? Why or why not?
We don't at my current school, but in the past I have. We have, and it can be touchy because you can get too much competition and hurt feelings and stuff like that. Because, for example, if you have 6 people, somebody has to be the lowest. Even though it's just a couple percentage points, it can get touchy. But it encouraged some of us to step it up and try to, you know, get as high as some of the other ones. So.
Okay. Other ideas or thoughts?
I know that we do, you know, of course, I have all the inclusion classrooms as a sped lead teacher. And sometimes people just assume that because it's the inclusion class that it's the lowest class, but quite often it is not the lowest class. So we do display those scores, and we do have healthy competition, and we learn from each other. So it's our responsibility too. If we have areas of where we need to improve, your you know, cohorts and teachers are the one that can help you get there.
Okay. Other ideas or thoughts? Anybody like absolutely opposed, think it's the worst idea ever? There's not a right or wrong answer, guys. I'm just curious.
Worst idea ever, but I think it's kind of, I don't know if I'd share everybody's with everybody, but I think there are appropriate settings for it.
Okay.
Like within your PLC, like that, because you've already got established norms within that group of how you share data, and you're more comfortable with them.
Okay.
Like this guy I see once a month at the staff meeting or something.
Right. Do you guys use data walls or have data rooms? Kind of a mixed bag? Just raise your hand so we can all see if you have data walls. Okay.
They're everywhere.
Yeah. Are you guys all, I think you guys are all elementary, aren't you?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Okay. How many of you have data rooms? Okay, yeah, I think it's more common, quite frankly, in elementary than it is in secondary. But at the same time, it's probably more needed in secondary than certainly we want to acknowledge. You know, one of the most successful high school principals I ever saw, she had a data room. She called it her war room. And, you know, it was, they posted everything. Now, what she did was, you know, if the campus goal was 90%, I'm just going to make it simple, 90% passing. Everybody who was above 90%, their name went up there. Everybody that was between 80 and 89, their names went there, you know, et cetera. And I asked her, I said, you know, this is really interesting. How do the people react when they're at the bottom? And she said, our mindset at this school is that if you're at the bottom, you either increase and improve or you need to leave and go to another school. But she had built a culture that was really focused on students because she said, you know, it's not about the teacher. We have to be concerned about the 40% of students who aren't passing, you know, the state graduation exam or meeting the ACT criteria to be college ready or, you know, whatever that was. But yeah, I think it can be tricky, but it also can be really empowering, you know, and I think you have to look at the climate of a school as well as the culture and build that in. You know, as a new principal, it wouldn't be the first thing I did, but, you know, I think it can be helpful over time. I'm trying to look here. Other questions or ideas? You guys are just like, okay, we've had enough data. It's 8:22, let us go. Just a couple things. I'm sorry, with being gone 3 days this week, some of you know, you were very kind and sweet and reached out to me, but my mom has eye cancer, which is pretty unusual, so I had to take her to Memphis for surgery. And so I tried to be on the internet as much as I could, but being in the hospital, you know, I just couldn't always get internet, so I'm a little bit behind where I want to be. But I will get your next set of assignments and all that stuff posted here hopefully tomorrow. I'm almost ready to turn it on live. I just want to kind of do another edit real quick. But next week we are going to be talking about doing a group assignment. So, you know, I'm going to give you an option. You can either participate in the group assignment or you can choose to do an individual assignment. I'll leave that up to y'all. The only thing I ask is that if you want to do an individual assignment, once I post the groups, let me know immediately. Because if I can't have a group with just 2 people in it. So if you want to opt out, that's absolutely fine. There's no penalty or anything like that. Just let me know because I'll need to redo the groups for those people that do want to participate. And I think somebody asked, and I may have answered, but I'll do it again. No, I'm not quite finished grading it because those of you that have had me before, I actually read everything you write, and I try to write comments and do all that. So I've got, this class is about 45 students, and my other class is almost 70. So it's taken me a little bit longer to get through them than in the past. But I do want to give you good feedback and do my due diligence. But hopefully I'll have everything graded tomorrow. I've got the discussion forums all done. And then all I've got left to do for right now are those reflective assignments. Some people are like, I'm afraid to do the next one and submit it until I have a grade, so I know how I did, but you guys are going to be fine. What I've seen so far has been really, really good and very thought-provoking, so y'all are on the right track. Okay? Any other questions? Comments? Concerns? Just make this more exciting than just good old data kind of thing? Okay, guys, well, if y'all don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn off our recording.